Well, I'll begin with a question that was asked by Sigmund Freud. He said, "What does woman want?" It's a very famous question that's been used again and again, usually ironically. And after listening for decades to the tormented histories of his female patients, Freud, the patriarch, still wasn't sure what they wanted. Now, what women want is what most of us want: the opportunity to live decent, fulfilling, loving, and secure lives. And before all that, women want something else. They want to stop being oppressed and victimized by men. And they also want to stop being victimized by the social order that has been created. It may not just be a particular man, but it may be a patriarchal social order. In most societies, women have been relegated to subordinate positions. Endowed with a denser musculature, larger frames, greater body strength, men have not been above using their physical strength to enforce their superordination. In addition, women have been burdened by a protracted pregnancy period, protracted lactation, and often the dependency of children on women have often made women dependent on others. Such biological differences might make male supremacy possible, but not inevitable. I mean, they're a necessary condition for abuse, but not a sufficient cause. Not every male mistreats women. I mean, all adults are stronger than children, but not every adult abuses children, although we find there are a lot more than we had thought. Other conditions have to obtain. According to one theory, much of a patriarchy gets more widely established as a real cultural and social force with the advent of surplus property. That is, when you move from early tribal subsistence society to developed horticulture society, you get surplus. With surplus, you get possessions and such. In the early hunting societies, for instance, there was an early horticulture. There was a relatively non-possessive enjoyment of children, a non-exploitative relationship between mates. Generally, I don't want to idealize these societies, over-idealize them. There was no private property other than personal effects and utensils and weapons, things like that. And women often played a surprisingly prominent role. Morgan's classic study of the Iroquois society, of ancient society, which very much impressed Engels, one of the discoveries was how the Iroquois women played a dominant role in the decision-making councils and the like. With the emergence of more developed horticulture and the advent of landed property, private profit was now possible. Family lineage and identity and possession gets tied to land and to wealth. The labor of women and children itself becomes a source of accumulation. There are some early theorists like Osborne Ward who says the first practices of slavery began in the patriarchal family, were affected on women and children by the patriarch, which shows you the confluence of gender and class oppression right from an early start. Women themselves become possessions in that kind of system. Their labor and sexuality becomes controlled in the service of profit and family and property and marriage. With class society comes the whole-scale subjugation of women. That's one of the theories. And I think it's a pretty fair approximation. I'm not saying it can't have some redoing in it and whatever else, but it makes a lot of sense. I would also argue something else more immediate, that people exploit other people because they get something from it. They benefit from it. It's advantageous to them. Whether you are the plantation owner who has slaves, or the feudal lord who has serfs, or you're the male who's exploiting women, or you're the boss who's exploiting workers, there's a reason you do it, and it's not because you're kind of hung up and you're not in touch with your inner feelings and you can't cry. It's because you like it, you enjoy it, you get a lot of good things. You live very well from it. You live very well off the labor of others. And I would say that female subjugation exists because it has worked to the advantage of males. It's a rather unpresupposing proposition, and yet it's amazing how people get startled that it works to the advantage of males. It's important to say that because today there's a lot of talk about how men are victimized by their own sexism. They cheat themselves out of mutually gratifying relationships. that in the long run it would be better for them if they didn't do these things. Maybe so, but nobody lives in the long run. They all live in the here and now. And in the here and now, we mustn't overlook the fact that patriarchal dominance provides its own gratifying privileges. The traditional patriarch has women who do all the drudgery work and child rearing, who tend to his personal needs, submit to his sexual desires, do not question his right to extramarital indulgences, are economically dependent on him, who supplement the social production and even the family income, provide subsistence labor, unpaid, much of it important and totally unpaid, and who have no defense against his tyrannical commands and his more corrupt impulses. The husbands, fathers, and employers who have reaped the benefits of this victimization over the centuries and to this day have not noticeably complained about feeling deprived of the deeper gratifications that come with gender equality, no more than have the pimps who live lavishly off the labor of their victimized prostitutes. Male dominance, I think, extends beyond the family into other social institutions. Just like racists, just like class oppressors, the male supremacist develops an array of myths to justify their advantages. Oh, what do you have, a conspiracy about this too, Parenti? I mean, you think they sit there and they consciously say, oh, how can we keep women in their place? And all that? Yes, 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 yes. Read Ann Jones' book. She has a very delightful preface, a book called Women Who Kill, and she says, all the literature in this field takes pains to say, I'm not positing a conspiracy theory. This is just the cultural mores, is something that just kind of happened and inertia built up. And this thing. They all make pains to say, well, I'm not saying that men have consciously conspired. She said, I want to say men have consciously conspired. All you got to do is deal with the law, deal with the police, deal with the political structure, deal with Orrin Hatch, deal with these people. Are you telling me there's no conscious conspiring? You're sitting there watching these guys on TV? Yes, of course they conscious. How do you think people maintain hegemony? How do you think they consciously think of how they can keep you in your place? They're thinking just as hard as feminist fighters and revolutionaries are thinking how to get out of it. And they have a lot more resources in many cases. So like the racists and like the class oppressors, the male supremacists developed this whole array of myths through the ages. Female subordination has been treated as a manifestation of the natural order of things. By the way, that is the common trait of all these oppressions. If you read the feudal lords, they will tell you the serfs naturally belong there. That is their place. It's the way it is. The Chinese landlord class used to have the phrase, the sun cannot rise in the west. And it meant that you peasants could no more change places with me or hope to better your life than you could expect the sun to rise in the west. It just doesn't happen. That this is all part of the natural order of things. And to develop that, they enlist folklore, religion, philosophy, science, literature. I mean, science is, the way science is, I was just reading, the way science has been enlisted in the support of racism, for instance, as you know. I was just reading George Templeman Strong, the patrician in the 19th century, who was saying, it's amazing, we have black people who are running businesses, writing literature, organizing organizations for their liberation, doing this, doing that, and this, but science comes in with a precision, a commanding precision to tell us that they are incapable of doing these things. And we must listen to science, even though science has been changing its hypotheses for the last 25,000 hypotheses that they've had. I'm not making it up. This is what he said. And it was kind of interesting to hear that from a, uptight New England patrician to have that awareness of the pretensions of science being rolled out here to tell us who should be in what place.